This is the Greatest Philosophers in History series, where we explore the most fundamental ideas of the most extraordinary minds humanity has ever produced. In this episode, we turn to Albert Camus, a writer, philosopher, journalist, and moral rebel who confronted one of the deepest questions of human existence. Is life worth living, even if it has no meaning? Early life. Poverty, loss, and outsiderhood. Albert Camus was born in 1913 in Algeria, then a French colony. He grew up in extreme poverty in a working-class family. His father died in the First World War when Camus was only a few months old. His mother, an illiterate cleaning woman, struggled to support the family. There were no books in the house, no intellectual environment. Only silence, labor, and survival. When Camus entered secondary school, he felt like a stranger. He came from a poor suburb and suddenly found himself surrounded by boys from middle-class families. Yet over time, he distinguished himself. At university, he became charismatic, intelligent, and socially magnetic. He loved football deeply, later saying, "All that I know most surely about morality and obligations I owe to football." At the age of 17, Camus was struck by tuberculosis, a diagnosis that shattered his physical strength and interrupted his studies. Forced into long periods of isolation, he turned inward and toward theater, philosophy, and literature. Theater, writing, and resistance. Camus founded an avant-garde theater group, Theater de l'Équipe, believing theater should be collective, ethical, and accessible. He later married Francine Faure, a pianist and mathematician, with whom he had twins, Catherine and Jean. In 1939, Camus published his play Caligula, a disturbing portrait of power, cruelty, and madness. Soon after came his most famous works, L'Étranger, The Stranger/The Outsider, The Myth of Sisyphus. During the Nazi occupation of France in 1940, Camus joined the French resistance. He became editor of the underground newspaper Combat, which became essential reading for students and intellectuals. His writing was no longer just philosophical, it was political, moral, and dangerous. After the war, Camus achieved international fame. In 1957, at just 44 years old, he received the Nobel Prize in Literature, becoming the second youngest recipient in history. In his Nobel speech, he declared that a writer must serve truth and freedom, even under tyranny. Algeria, exile, and solitude. Despite his success, Camus was deeply conflicted. Algeria was fighting for independence, and Camus, caught between identities, could not accept full independence. Algeria was his childhood, his son, his soil. This position isolated him politically and emotionally. He wrote, "I wanted to live according to the morality of the majority. The result was catastrophic. Now I wander among the wreckage." After the Nobel Prize, Camus was no longer poor, but he lived simply, dressing elegantly yet remaining inwardly solitary. He lived in France, painfully cut off from Algeria, experiencing a deep sense of exile. Absurdism, the core of Camus' philosophy. Camus is best known for developing absurdism, though he rejected the label of existentialist. The absurd arises from a fundamental conflict. Humans crave meaning, order, and purpose. The universe offers silence, randomness, and indifference. The world itself is not absurd. Our relationship with it is. As Camus wrote, "Man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him his longing for happiness and for reason." The stranger. Absurdity made flesh in The Stranger. Camus introduces Meursault, a man emotionally detached from society. He does not cry at his mother's funeral. He speaks honestly without social performance. In a famous scene, overwhelmed by heat, sunlight, and confusion, Meursault kills a man, a stranger, almost involuntarily. This single absurd moment throws him into the world of judgment. Meursault is condemned not only for murder, but for not pretending to feel what society expects him to feel. He represents what Camus calls the madness of sincerity, the refusal to lie about one's emotions. The Myth of Sisyphus. Suicide and defiance. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus opens with one of the most provocative lines in philosophy. "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." Camus argues that suicide, whether physical or philosophical, is a refusal to confront the absurd. Philosophical suicide includes religious faith as an escape from uncertainty, ideologies that promise absolute meaning, escaping into distraction and entertainment. For Camus, belief systems often soothe anxiety, but at the cost of intellectual honesty. Instead, he proposes the figure of the absurd man, someone who accepts the absence of meaning, refuses hope-based illusions, chooses to live fully anyway. Sisyphus and the art of living. Camus compares human life to Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder up a hill forever only to watch it fall again. The tragedy is not repetition, it is consciousness. Yet Camus concludes, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happiness, for Camus, is not comfort, but defiant lucidity. Revolt, solidarity, and moral limits. In The Rebel, Camus explores rebellion, not as violent revolution but as ethical resistance. He warns against nihilistic revolutions that destroy life in the name of utopia, citing totalitarian regimes like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. True rebellion, Camus argues, respects human limits, preserves dignity, builds solidarity. His famous conclusion, I revolt, therefore we exist. The Plague. Decency in an absurd world. In The Plague, Camus tells the story of a deadly epidemic in Oran. The disease is random, unjust, and meaningless, like life itself. The hero, Dr. Ruse, does not seek glory or explanations. He simply does his job. Camus writes, the only way to fight the plague is with decency. Decency, Ruse explains, is doing one's duty, even when nothing makes sense. Final Works and Death. Camus' final novel, The Fall, is a haunting confession about guilt, hypocrisy, and moral cowardice. In 1960, Camus died suddenly in a car accident. In his pocket was an unused train ticket. In the wreckage, a handwritten manuscript, later published as The First Man, revealed a deeply personal portrait of his life. Camus' legacy. Albert Camus teaches us that life has value, even without meaning. Hope is optional, but honesty is not to live fully, is to revolt against despair. He does not promise salvation. He offers courage. Camus asks us to live, not because life makes sense, but because it is here, and because to live is itself an act of rebellion.